Hello, welcome to the September 9th, 2022 Club Cubase live stream. I'm going to do a quick audio test, make sure everything is coming through as expected, and then we will begin. Bear with me just for a moment. Hello, welcome to the September 9th. All right, everything sounds fine on my monitoring computer. My name is Greg Undo. I work for Yamaha Corporation of America as a product specialist, primarily focusing on Steinberg products. And I'll be the host for the live stream today. I'm presenting from outside of, in the United States, outside of Washington, D.C. and Alexandria, Virginia. If you are watching the live stream, please feel free to, if you're watching it live, please feel free to tell us who you are and where you're from. Give us a quick little introduction. And you could do that even if you're not watching live. So if you have not attended a Club Cubase live stream before, how it works is you could ask questions in the live chat field. We will go through each of the questions chronologically rather. So we will just go through each of the questions. If for some reason you don't see an immediate response to your question, what you could do is, just instead of asking the same question repeatedly over and over again, just try to be patient, and we'll get through the question in order that it was asked. If for some reason I lose a question, I'll let people know, and you could ask questions then. But if we have the same questions over and over again, it just kind of slows down the whole process. When asking questions, if we could specify which version of Cubase you're running, whether it's 10, 10.5, 11, or 12, or if you're running levels of Cubase LE, AI, Elements, Artist, or Pro, or if you're running a different Steinberg program, that's fine. We answer other Steinberg questions, other Steinberg products questions. So if you could specify that, and also which operating system that you're running. That information is often helpful. We should have an index of all the topics covered tonight, several hours after the live stream, and that will be pinned to the top of the comments field of the video so that you could use that as a reference. It may be a little later than usual. I have to go to my son's school picnic right after the live stream ends, so it may be an hour or two later than usual, but we'll try to get it up tonight. And if you wanted to search for topics, I think we've covered now over 20,000 topics in the Club Cubase live streams since the COVID had started. You could go to cubaseindex.com, and we want to thank Jan from Stockholm for all of his great efforts in compiling that information for the website. We have two people that serve as moderators for the live stream. So we want to thank Jazz Dude and Agent K for their moderation. They're not Steinberg employees. They just do it to make it a better environment for different users. So we want to give special thanks to them. If you're looking for a wonderful resource of information that's relevant to the Steinberg community, check out the Cubase Nation Discord. And that is also does a lot of great work. To compile that information is done by Jazz Dude, so I want to give special thanks to him as well. So let's go ahead and get started. Let me go through our chat here. All right, so we see Jazz Dude's on from Germany, and we have Cubase Index, Jan from Stockholm. We have Stefan from Sweden. All right, we have Benny also checking in from Sweden. All right, we have Gerald Ely from Martinez, California. So Gerald had asked a question earlier about the tempo information being inconsistent with the project and when using the IC Pro app. So I was able to confirm that. So I'll make sure to kind of pass along that. But I just wanted to let you know, Gerald, I got my charging cable back for my son and got my iPad charged up. So it seems like my tempo is always kind of off and doesn't really follow with the project tempo. So I'll make sure to pass that along to the team. I just want to mention that before I forgot. All right, so we see Brian Sawyer checking in from Beulahville, North Carolina. Thanks for joining us. We have Soren, also from Sweden. Patrick Becker from Germany. We have Uno Memento, longtime Cubase user from Finland. Thanks for joining us. We have John Shaman. All right, and we have Ahmad Salsa checking in from Jordan. Thanks for being on the live stream today. All right, and we have Techno joining us from Russia. Thanks for being here. Matt Elston from London, longtime and loyal attendee. We have Panos saying hi. We have Nick Saya. Okay, so we have a question from Best Green Jesus. Is there a quick way to undissolve an event other than gluing it back together? So I'm not sure if it's an audio event or a musical event, but let's say if we come over here, let's say I'll just try with audio. So let's say I have joined these together, but maybe Best Green Jesus, if you could let us know if it's going to be audio or MIDI. So let's say if I grab the correct tool this time, so let's say I grab my glue gun and we glue these events together so that now as we have glued audio events together, when we do this, it takes it from an event to a part. So a part could be a collection of events. So now when we double click, we go into the part editor. So often people discover this when they try to do like a fade in or fade out or clip gain, and all that is going to be accessible directly within the part editor. So if we have taken audio events and at this point collected them together as a part, what we could do is go to the audio menu, and then we have the function for dissolve part. So we're here, dissolve part, and then we have that together. But if it was with MIDI, MIDI doesn't necessarily take those into consideration. So let's say if I have MIDI events and I've glued these together, all I would have to do is come over and cut. And if I hold down the Alt or Option key, we could cut multiple events, kind of like so. So the best way to do it is just to use the dissolve part feature. So, and just kind of rereading the question again. So the best way to undissolve an event other than gluing it back together. So I think if we come over here, let's just say, often if we wanted to take this, so let me dissolve the part. So if I wanted to take these, we could say events to part. So, and that kind of does the opposite. So let me know if I understood correctly. Okay, so we have a question. Hi, Greg. I want to create an ARP effect on his synth pad, but without changing the pitch, just to cover the tempo. Any quick idea? Okay, so let's say I'll just load up a synth pad here. Just load it up correctly this time. Sorry. Okay, so it says I want to create an ARP effect on a synth pad, but without changing pitch, just cover the tempo. So let's say if I just wanted to come here and so if you don't want it to actually do kind of like an arpeggiator, let's come over here. Let's just say MIDI inserts. Okay, so generally when we do all right, let's say if we set the key range to okay, so let's say we just wanted to do see if there's a MIDI plugin that we could maybe even MIDI echo. So here we could just say like a 16th note straight delay. So if you wanted to do stuff like that, or let's say you want to do like an 8th note straight delay. So you could maybe try like the MIDI echo, and a lot of times, you know, depending on the instrument, you may be able to have kind of different arpeggiators, but try using the MIDI echo plugin. And let me know if that is helpful. So, or we could take maybe a different approach. All right, so John Costigan says, please hit the like button as it pays the rent. So it's pretty inexpensive leasing opportunity there. So, all right, and we have Ohm Home is just saying hi, first time here. Welcome to the live streams. And if you have any questions, just please feel free to ask any question, even the most basic or most advanced, and we'll try to help you out. All right, and we see a comment from Bjorn Wegner, and great that you host this live stream for so long. Great work and many great inputs. So thanks for the kind words. All right, so we have Sable Winters checking in. She's like number 29. Thank you. Great to have you on, Sable. And we have Alexander checking in from Connecticut. Robbie Bowling, long time and very, very loyal attendee from Dallas, Texas. We hope you're well. All right, so we have a question. I'm running Mojave Mac OS. I've been testing Cubase 12 demo, and it's running even though the system requirements say nothing about Mojave. Will Cubase run perfect? So a lot of times when the OSs are kind of cut off for the versions, that just means it hasn't gone through all of the quality assurance testing. So many people I know are running it in Mojave. I was running it in Mojave until my recent computer without any consequences, and it seemed I didn't have any problems. But, you know, when you're going through, let's say, a Mac OS and there's, 7 revisions, they have to go through and do the quality assurance test on 7 revisions of 2 or 3 operating systems on Mac. And the same on the Windows platform. So at that point, they don't necessarily go back multiple years. But and what I would always suggest is to try the trial version and see how it's working for you. And we have some people that are even running it on Catalina and aren't having any problems. So it could be that maybe plugins may not work on older systems as there's changes. So All right, so we have Danielle Tokan saying hello. Thanks for joining us. All right. Okay, so we see a question. How do you adjust the volume on a click track, and why is it not part of the click track menu? Okay, so there's a couple ways. So if you're running the, and I know from remotely viewing your computer, if we come over here, I turn my click track on, and we go to the control room that you could adjust the click track volume directly there. I think we could also, if we go to our metronome setup, and let's go to click sounds. So we can set the audio click level softer here. So if I want this to be 85 or 86 beats, you know, we set our click level directly there in the click setup. So if you go to general tab, go to click sounds, there's the audio click level there as well. So you could do it directly from the control room or from the metronome setup. And again, just go to transport, metronome setup, click sounds, and then you'll see audio click level directly there. So let me know if that works for you, Brian. Okay, so we see from Best Korean Jesus kind of a just a clarification on his dissolving. Okay, so he says, sorry, I meant dissolve MIDI event by pitch and then gluing the MIDI track together. So let's go ahead and kind of create a scenario for that. So I'll take a drum part here. I'll just drag a drum pattern over. Sorry, let me just get this into. If I can drag it in. All right, there we go. All right, so now what I want to do is we'll go to MIDI and we'll choose dissolve part. So, and let's go ahead and we'll dissolve to separate pitches. So now we're going to take what is multiple MIDI notes on a particular sound and we will separate the pitches. So now each pitch is on its own. So let me see if we could select these. Just take a look, see if there's a. Yes, I think the best way might be to, take them on top of each other and glue. Well, let me just see if there's some other. Merging function. Okay, so now if I have this in the loop, let's see if the merge MIDI and loop. So it looks like if you have the loop set around the events, that what you could do is select this and go to merge MIDI in loop, and then that will kind of do kind of the opposite way. So give that a try. Sorry for misunderstanding earlier. All right. All right, so we have Spike Williams checking in from Wales. Thanks for joining us. All right, and he's like number 36. That's great. All right, so we have a question. Does Cubase do plugin delay compensation automatically, or is that something that I have to turn on? So it's automatically handled. So all you have to do is just simply, it's as Cubase starts up, like the very first time, it measures the latency of each plugin, and from there it knows that when you instantiate this plugin, that it causes this much delay, so it knows what the delay compensation is as part of the plugin format with VST. All right, so we see Bjorn just says, great solution with the MIDI echo. So glad that worked. All right, wonderful to see Tim Weinheimer from Mission Viejo, California. All right, so we just see a question. Can you change the color of the solo and mute buttons? So I think that they're fixed, but let me just check. I'm pretty sure that they're fixed, but I'll just make sure. Yeah, so I believe that those colors for the solo and mute will be fixed, but I think it's pretty standard for solo to be red, kind of, it's the, what used to always be affectionately known as the rude solo light. So, all right, so we see Michael Teams from Weatherford, Texas, able to join us. We all missed having you on the live stream on Tuesday. Everyone was missing their ice cream, so. All right. All right, so we have Jesse Carmichael on the live stream. Just says, Greg, hope you and your family are well. We're doing great, and likewise to you all. All right, could you run through the best way to do sequential takes of a MIDI instrument and then comp between them after, just like it were audio? Okay, so I'll just come over here. Let's do quick. Just turn on my snap here quickly. Okay, so when we go into your MIDI record, we could do kind of different, there's different behavior, and I'm not sure what the reasoning is, but between kind of cycled and linear record. So like here, I would just put it, if I was doing it on like a MIDI recording, I would put it on stacked mode and then enable the loop. So if I wanted to now just come over here, let's say we record. All right, so now once I've done that, I could see my different takes and just like how we would comp audio. I could come and just do my cycled recording for editing for MIDI. So once again, just switch the record mode. And if you want to do kind of like, vocal comping, try just doing it in cycled record mode and choosing stacked there. And then that will behave the same exact way as with comping audio. So thanks for being on the live stream, Jesse. He's based in Los Angeles. All right, so we see a question from John Costigan from Kenosha, Wisconsin. I want to increase the tempo and pitch 1 to 2% like a reel-to-reel tape machine, but only the tempo on the MIDI tracks change. Audio is set to tape machine mode. Okay, so say I'll take this project here. Okay, so I want to make sure all of my audio one is enabled. I'll do a different project here just to show. All right, so let's say we have our tempo of like 100 beats per minute. So I want to make sure that all of the tracks are in musical mode, and we could also just kind of switch the algorithm. We could do that from the info line if it's visible, or you could go to the pool window, and I'm going to switch the time stretch algorithm here to Elastic Pro tape. Okay, so if they're not changing at all, it would seem that maybe the tracks themselves aren't in musical mode. So what this will do is kind of like a vary speed. So let's say I'm at 100 beats a minute, and now I go to 96 beats a minute. That some of the tracks will just slow down, and some and some of the tracks will slow down and some won't. So as we just kind of play, this will slow the pitch down and slow down the speed. So make sure that you have each of the events set to musical mode here, John. And if it's not set to musical mode, if it's not following the tempo changes for the audio, so the MIDI will generally do that by default, but make sure each of the audio tracks are set to musical mode and that musical mode is enabled. All right, so we see from Ohm Home says, I just took the leap to Cubase 12 from Ableton Live, so I have a lot to learn. So you're in the right place. Just feel free to ask any questions. So we have people at all sorts of different levels and abilities here to help you out along your path so that you could realize your music using Cubase. All right. So we see Sable Winters just upgraded from Cubase Pro 12 from 11. Didn't hurt a bit. Now let's see how this goes. That's great. And glad that you're able to probably take advantage of the latest Steinberg promotion going on. So, and we see that Jazz Dudes posted a link for that, but there currently is a promotion going on for 40% off of updates and new versions. So take a quick look at that if you have friends that haven't upgraded or that should be running Cubase. We all have friends that should be running Cubase that aren't. It's a wonderful opportunity for them. And there's also, if you're an existing user, if you have like Cubase Pro, you can get an additional 5 plugins like Arturia's CS80V. So all sorts of great plugins. All right, so we see Shira, Princess of Power. My first time here. Love Cubase. Thanks for joining us. All right, so we see Daniela Tocan says, I do not speak any English, but new registered Cubase Pro. So thanks for being a new member of the family and welcome. And there's probably, we probably have to have this in English because I'm kind of the quintessentially ignorant American who doesn't speak a lot of languages well. So, but there's a lot of probably translation services that you could type it into Google Translate and be able to have it translated. And you could ask, I know we have people that do that. Okay, so we see question, how can we assign MIDI CC like expression, modulation, etc. to MIDI controller like Novation keyboard fader with new mapping ability in Cubase? Would be a great help in orchestral programming. So generally when we get into the MIDI remote, you could just come here and this would be used to control different aspects of the program. But if you're recording kind of MIDI CC data, there's really no, and you wanted to have expression, modulation, maybe volume going from knobs on your controller, you wouldn't really use this because those information is just going to be captured into a MIDI event. So let me just take a look, see if I have a project. So, while we want to just kind of, work with different orchestral libraries, we may just have to move like the modulation wheel to do that. So what often makes more sense to do this is to take, from the MIDI controller itself, what you could do is if we go to a MIDI insert, we could, at this point, put up a MIDI monitor. So you can say, okay, I have a slider. And I can see that when I move this slider, it's actually transmitting controller 3. So what you could often do is in the controller itself is to remap controller 3 to, so I want this knob that's doing controller 3 in the controller. Often you could say instead of controller 3, have this transmit controller 11, like for expression, or controller 7 for volume, or 10 for panning, whatever. So you could, and then, depending on how the instrument responds to different CCs, you could have your controller do that. Now, if your controller doesn't have the ability, most 99% of controllers, going back, more than 30 years, will have the ability to remap what CCs are being transmitted. If you have the ability where it's like I'm moving a knob, but I can't change the CC, so I wanted to take controller 3, this knob, and have this transform into controller 11, we could come over here and use something called the input transformer. So if we come over here, we could just say, okay, on this particular track, we're going to open up the input transformer. And I want to be able to do, so I want to turn controller 3 into controller 11. So we can have 4 different controllers. So I'm going to say, okay, so we're going to edit this. And we're going to say, I want to insert, we're going to say type is equal to controller. And what we want to do is value 1, which is the controller number. So I have, my knob is transmitting controller 3. I want to add 8 to this. Now we could also just say, I want to take every controller number equal to 3 and add 8 to it. So as soon as this is activated here, when we go back to our MIDI monitor, now as I adjust, we can see that instead of controller 11, instead of controller 3, it's adding 8 to the controller value. And then when we come here, deactivate that, the same knob is controller 3, turn it on. Now controller 3 is automatically transformed. So generally the MIDI, this would be, take this MIDI command and do a function in the program. But, if it's just taking existing MIDI controllers, The best method is to assign the correct MIDI CC in your controller so that it's transmitting. And if not, we could use the input transformer to take, if for some reason it's fixed, you could come over here and use the input transformer to, at that point, just change the controllers like so. So if it's transmitting controller 10 and you want that to be controller 11, you would just say add 1. So let me know if that's helpful. But yeah, you could definitely use, once you have those kind of set up for your orchestral work, it's very common to have, like, I have a choice OS controller here that I could just use for all my, MIDI expression and writing CC data. All right, my chat field just jumped on me, so. All right, I think I'm back. All right, so I was just seeing, I was wondering if there is a tap function feature in Artist 11. So I guess maybe this is like for tap tempo. I'm assuming, but if not, please let me know. So say if I wanted to come and do like a tempo map. So one of the things that we could do is come directly here. So say, okay, we go to the project. So if you wanted to get kind of like an initial tempo, you could actually just kind of click here. So we could just say, okay, so if I click here with the mouse, so if I'm just clicking, or if I wanted to just kind of do tap tempo here with my hitting my space bar, my keyboard to set, it's like, oh, I want tempo to be like this fast. Then you could set the tempo there. If we have a let's say if I wanted to do like a whole tempo map via tapping, I could record so I'm just going to hit like MIDI notes as like, say, quarter notes here. And now as we do this, we could go to our MIDI menu and go to functions, and you'll see merge tempo from tapping. We'll say, okay, this is equal to quarter notes. And at that point, we could have tempos set that way. So let me know if that's what you mean by a tap function. All right, so we have Scott Fairclough checking in from Nashville area. Thanks for joining us. So we see Gerald Ely just saying, dissolving MIDI events by pitch. Cool. I love to take out parts of Groove Agent grooves. Yeah, so it's a lot of flexibility. All right, so I just see from Daniela, maybe this is a translation. I see that maybe she was communicating with Jazz Dude in German. Says, but in the background runs at a backbone, a dedicated server, and I did install all in the cloud. Latency is not any question. So maybe if Jazz Dude could help translate, that would be appreciated. So we see, is the latest Mac OS update compatible? So yeah, if you have the latest versions of Cubase, so yes. No concerns there. All right, so we have Elevation just saying, hey, Greg, nice to be back on the live stream. So we're glad to have you back. Good to see you again. All right, so we have Nick checking in from Essex in the UK. Thanks for joining us. All right. Hi, Greg. Any fast way to create a slow motion effect? For example, I want to slow down tempo for less than a bar and then, excuse me, and then back to normal speed. Any stock plugin or technique to do that? So there's probably two different ways to do this. So I'll just revert this. All right, so a plugin, if you wanted to do this via a plugin, you could check out, and it's found under Other. It's called Loop Mash FX. So let's say as we're playing along, so we could just, if you want to do like different kind of tape stop type of effects, and you could set and you could actually just kind of play this in real time. So, but also if I wanted to just take like my audio here. So let's say I have a tempo map. So I'm going to add a tempo track. And we'll activate our tempo, let's say at 100 beats a minute. It's kind of what our tempo is of this project. So if we're in... so I'm going to select all of the events, and we're going to make sure that they're all in musical mode. So now as we do this, and I could set the algorithm here. So let's go to my pool window, and we want to put this algorithm into elastic tape. So I'm going to select the top file here. And we'll select top. Let's go to bottom, hold down shift. Okay, so now this is all in elastic tape. So if we wanted to, so let's say right here, I'm just going to put in a quick tempo change. So I'll just say let's put it. So you could do stuff like that. So once it's kind of mimicking the behavior, like we saw, like showed with John Costigan's question earlier about doing kind of tape stops and slowing down for one particular measure. So if you wanted to just have it play back kind of normal tempo here. So you could do stuff like that. So let me know if that's helpful. All right, so we see AJ Soundbite says ran down home for stream as soon as work finished, late by 30 minutes. So, all right, your only consequence is you have to hit the like button immediately. So, all right, so we see John Costigan saying that's it exactly, very speed trick on the Sly Stone singles. Thank you, Greg and Cubase. All right. All right, so we have a question. I'm using Groove Agent SE, but when I try to import a pattern into my project, the pattern I want imported is not there. There is a pattern titled fill that seems to go in instead. How do I fix this? Okay, so let me just jump to different project. Okay, so let's say I have different patterns here. So let's say all right, so now if I just kind of drag so any pattern that I kind of just drag and drop will immediately get dropped in. Take it off. And now it's kind of just broken. So, but make sure that when you're dragging patterns in, one of the things is, you may want to come over here and click on the Omni button, but as soon as we kind of just drag in a particular pattern here, that is just kind of playing back. And if you're doing it so let's say with a Beat Agent kit, as I come over here, let's say we'll listen to. I can drag in fills as well, but make sure you'll see kind of the outline pattern here. And if you're playing, it could be, let's say if we go to the edit and you're looking at the patterns, maybe it gets switched if you have like pattern the fills. So let's come over here to, where you could actually just say, every 4 measures do a fill. So maybe it's being switched. But it seems to kind of work for me, but let me know if I did something differently than you did. All right, so we have Mel James saying hello, good evening from the UK. So thanks for joining us. Okay, so we have a question. Old audio track imported not at steady tempo and drum track not on the beat. How do you correct? Okay, so let me just go to this project here. Okay, so we listened to our metronome. So no correlation. So we can take any of the files here. So let's say, okay, I just want to go to I'm going to select the event, go to the project window. So there's two different approaches. One is to create the tempo map that follows the actual music. So I'm going to come over here and do a tempo detection, and we'll analyze. And I'm going to just click here on offbeat correction. So now it's created a tempo map. So if we want the tempo to follow, if we want the metronome to follow the musical performance, which sometimes is helpful, we could do that. But let's say now I'm going to just put in a signature track. So let's say right there. So as we go to listen to it. Now, if we wanted this track to, now that we've figured out kind of what all the tempo changes are in the track, and if we want this track to play back at a steady tempo, I select the event or events, go to advanced, and let's say set definition from tempo, hit OK. And now I'm going to just take off our tempo here. Now I can make it a steady 120 beats a minute. And whatever kind of tempo that I type in, let's say 144, now it's going to play back perfectly steady at 144 beats a minute. So once again, if you go to audio and go to advanced and set definition from tempo, then all of the tempo change information is embedded into the project, or actually you could also choose to embed it within the audio file itself. So you could, if you drop it into other projects, you don't have to repeat the process. But at that point, you could just make it steady. So you could have the tempo follow the existing audio. So if you wanted to add loops and stuff like that and place it into musical mode, it'll automatically follow. Or if you wanted to take an audio file that was fluctuating a lot in tempo and be able to, at that point, just say, I want it to be more steady, you have that option as well. So you can do it both ways. All right, so we see a question. Hi, Greg. Greetings from the Netherlands. What happened to Rewire in 12? And are there other ways to connect, for instance, Sibelius to Cubase? So Rewire was abandoned by the company, I guess we called Abandonware, by Reason Studios, had abandoned it. So it's no longer being supported or developed, and it's not going to work with more contemporary operating systems. So if you wanted to actually work with getting files from Sibelius into Cubase, you would have to export it as a MIDI file, or simply work on it, or you could export as a music XML file. But the two, there isn't a way to have them currently kind of play back in sync with each other. See, Spike Williams was giving Mel James, says, you're going to love the answer to this question. I did it recently. Tempo Detect is awesome. All right. So you see Garrett Hager just saying, really appreciate the live streams, by the way. So glad it's useful. So. All right. So we see a question. I'm noticing that sometimes when I freeze instrument tracks that it doesn't play back correctly, sometimes with missing notes or cut off notes. Is there anything I can do to fix this? Cubase 12 Pro. So I'm not sure if it's, so generally when freezing the tracks, see if, I think I've heard of situations. I don't have a VE Pro license, but I think that there could be, I think I've heard of this happening with VE Pro. So I'm not sure if you're doing it with internal instruments, Daniel, or if it's hosted elsewhere in a different, but maybe we could see if we could isolate it, and if you could let me know what instruments, and also if you have a particular, if you see that it's going to be for particular instruments, maybe we could isolate it to that, but I don't think there's any user settings for that, but sometimes some plugins don't render or don't switch different articulations, like as expected. So, all right. So you see from VTS 404, thank you, Greg. The MIDI controller setup is really helpful. Let me try that. So yeah. All right. So Michael Teams wants people to whack the like button. All right, my chat field just jumped. All right, so I think I'm back. All right, so we see how to undo parameter from VST or third-party plugins. So it's a question. So let's say if I have plugins here, so let's say I open up, and we can do this like in the mixer. It's going to have its own dedicated undo history. So if we come over here, let's say, okay, I change the volume, I change the panning, I adjust the volume, I adjust the EQ, I add a gate. I want it to come here. Let's add compressor. And this would work if I wanted to add plugins. I wanted to add, let's say, my curve EQ. That's a third-party plugin. All right, so we've done kind of all this. Now, when you go to the mix console, you'll see that you'll just have, I'll just open this up so we can see all the changes. This little undo history, and you could also hit Alt or Option depending on your operating system, and this would undo like all the different parameters. I'll just open this up. So all my different parameters here, we could just undo within plugins and within the mixer. So try hitting Alt or Option plus Z. And if you're in, you can see the mix console history that you could adjust kind of there's your, the undo history for all of your plugins and mixer settings. So try Alt or Option plus Z. See Michael Teams just passing on condolences about the passing of Queen Elizabeth. So that's a great sentiment to share. All right, David M. just saying hi, everyone. Great to see some new Cubase users here today. So yeah, it's wonderful, and we hope that you're able to make live streams in the future and be a part of the community. All right, so we see Chris Howlam just asking, anyone working on PC and Mac back and forth, Cubase 12 Pro here, wondering if I share project folders with myself via OneDrive, if I will encounter any weirdness doing voiceover work for work. I go back and forth all the time and I don't use OneDrive. We have kind of a corporate thing called Ignite, which is kind of like a online cloud backup, but I don't have any problems kind of going back and forth between Mac and PC. I kind of do it all day. So I have keyboards and mice, so I could switch back and forth between 3 computers at once. So I'm constantly doing it. So I don't think you'll run into any problems, Chris. All right, so we see from Jay from Connecticut. It says, hi, Greg, in case I'm missing it, is there any ways built within the Nuendo Cubase channel interface to split signals, create parallel chains, in case I'm overlooking features? So what a lot of people, if you're doing parallel stuff, is just sending it. So let's say if I have two group tracks. So let's say I want to do this and I want to, we'll add group tracks. Okay, so once I come here, we could now send it to group 1 and to group 2. So as we do this, we'll see, I'll just hide my input channels. So if I wanted to do, different processing, so, we could do this also, if you wanted to, as we go into sends, if we wanted to only do processing on particular channels, you could even just open up any kind of multi-band plugin. So if you wanted to go to like an imager, we could say, okay, I just wanted only, let's say 2 bands, and so say 1 band, and I wanted to solo, like this particular band. So let's say I have 2 bands here, and I wanted to, only pass these particular frequencies. So, once we're kind of sending it down parallel paths, is really just kind of, you could do it by sending it down 2 different groups and processing those separately if you wanted to. But let me know if I misunderstood. Okay, so Volker is just saying hi to all Cubase lovers. Okay, so I see a question. Hi, Greg. If I select more than 1 note in a MIDI file with 3 notes, I can only hear 1 note playing. I can turn this on and off so I can hear all 3 at the same time. Okay, let me see if I think I understand. Okay, so let's say if we want to hear, all right, and I think I have this track muted, so. All right, so make this a little louder here. All right, so if you wanted to like hear, all like multiple notes here. So, when we're selecting, we can do that. But one trick that you could do, I think if you hold down like the control key, that when you select a note here, you could hear like all the notes kind of. It's like if that's part of a chord, you could just kind of. So just try clicking while holding down the control key. Otherwise, when you select, I don't think it will sound, but just try holding down control and clicking. And see if that is kind of what you want to do. All right, we see Michael Teams is starting with his ice cream distribution. See, Nick is saying Google is eating his messages today. So sorry to hear that. All right, so Mopman's already looking for his ice cream, so I think it's just started. Okay, so I just see from AJ's Sound Bites that may have missed a question. So if you want to just ask the question again, sorry. See if I could go back. So I see ran down home from the stream. So let me just see. There's one earlier. Yeah, sorry, I see your comment to Daniel. Yeah, please feel free to ask your question again. Sorry about that. All right, trying to find my spot again. All right. All right, so we just see from Daniela, how does this work? Is there a demonstration? So really what we do is we just kind of we answer questions that people have. So it's not a set topic. It's really just the topic is whatever people ask. So. All right, so we see from Bruce just saying, even though a lot of this is over my head, I'm still learning from all of you. So. All right, so we see question. Hey, Greg, I did something I really love on Cubase 3. How can I load that project into Cubase 12 Pro? So really all you have to do is there's a Cubase project importer. I think you may have to just download that and install it. It's a little simple utility. And at that point, when you get a file, you'll see import. You'll see Cubase project, and then that will just load directly in. Yeah. Okay. So you see Nick is also not seeing a question from AJ Soundbites. So, all right. Wonderful to have Mandy Lane back on the live stream. Glad you could make it today. All right. And wonderful. Great to see David Ruder and Kristen Parisi on from Big Tent in Nashville. Hope you both are doing well. Okay, just kind of reading through comments. All right, so we have a question. Do you have any recommendations for how to keep track of huge projects besides freezing tracks? Sometimes we get so big it corrupts, and we have to restore from backup. So having I guess the running joke would be always having more RAM, as much RAM as you can. So, but a lot of times, what people can be doing, if you have tracks that aren't being utilized, you could come over and just, so a lot of people that are working on huge projects may have different tracks. So, they may have instruments loaded that aren't taking any processing power. So those could still take up a lot of memory and processing power, just loading up an instrument that's not being used. So one of the things that you could do is any instrument that's not being utilized, you could just disable those particular tracks. And then if you need to use it at that point, enable the selected tracks. Also within the plugins, I know like if we go to, if we have if we come over here to even like a Halion Sonic SE, there will be different functions to purge unused samples. So you could, so like a lot of samplers can go through and actually, play through and unload unused samples. So sometimes if you have like, a whole string patch and you're using 4 samples out of 500 that are loaded, different samplers will have kind of like a way to unload those particular plugins. So if you haven't done that stuff, that's always a great place to start. Okay, so just saying from Daniela, just says run Hackintosh, means Catalina on one PC and the other Windows 10. I connect with VSL software, but in a live stream demo, I like to demonstrate both. So I don't have a license of VSL to work with. But so I'm not sure if you wanted to do a live stream or if you wanted to see how that worked. But I don't, I just have Steinberg products on my work computer. Sorry about that. All right. So we have a question. Is there any way we could see the chord name in the MIDI editor while selecting the notes? So one of the things that you could do, I'll just find a project here. Okay, so let's say I'm in my MIDI editor here. And I'm going to enable the status line. So when we do this, so now as I play, we can see the chords just kind of as we play back.
You stare at the ground, not a sound. Tell me why.
Now, if I've used this part to generate a chord track, so if I have a chord track here and I drag this event up, and then when I go into, let's say, my MIDI editor, we could also enable global tracks so we can see the chords track.
Something's wrong, we can't go on living the life. How can I feel you?
So you can see the chord track there, or as you do it, you could actually go to the little setup window and make sure you had the status line. And then you could also just see it in the status line as you kind of play back. Right there. So. All right, so we see from VTS 404, thank you so much for doing these live streams. Okay. So I just see from Daniela, I decided on, says, I'm a DaVinci Resolve Fairlight certified trainer and I use heavy MuseScore. It means I compose first with scores and do not need MIDI editor. So I guess if you are doing that, you could, I don't know, the Fairlight, the DaVinci Resolve or MuseScore, but, you could obviously, have the MIDI information play back in Cubase and probably have a lot more control. All right, so we see question, the Native Complete 14 is being released soon. Have you or any of the other Steinberg colleagues have a chance to see if their new instruments and effects have been updated to work properly in Cubase? So a lot of times, they have, I know Steinberg does a really good job of, since we own VST, that we actually, provide all that to the different development companies. So I know we do it here in the U.S. for Native Instruments. I haven't had any experience with Native Instruments Complete 14 yet. So, but I'm sure some of our colleagues in Hamburg have. So. And we see, so for example, are all their instruments in Complete 14 all VST3 now, finally. So I can't really speak for them. I haven't really followed it this week. Been busy with some other work stuff. But, maybe you could ask on Ask Native Instruments. Maybe they have a live stream. So. All right, so we see from AJ Soundbites, it says, I posted the question again, as Jazz said, can no one see it? So I'm not seeing it, but if you want to, quickly send it to me at clubcubase@steinberg.de, I'd be happy to take a look. I'm sorry that your questions aren't showing up. Sometimes that happens to people. Not sure. So I see your comments asking if anyone's seen your question, but I don't see your question, so. All right, so we see from Ohm Home, this is great. Does this live stream occur every Friday? So we do it 2 times a week. So we do it on Tuesday and Friday starting at 1 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time, and then you could watch them afterwards if you needed to. So. All right. So we see Captain Energy Music's wishing everyone a happy 909 day. Yeah, it always seems like 808 day gets better marketing. So. All right, so we see question. Hi, I've got Cubase 12 Elements on Windows 11. Every time I disable a track, the program crashes. So see if you disable like an audio track, if you get the same exact functionality, or if it's with particular instruments. So sometimes when you do this and you choose to enable or disable a track, try one at a time and see, and that's basically unloading all the plugins. Sometimes plugins don't like to be unloaded and they like to stay resident in memory, and that could cause a crash. So let me know if it's check to see if it's, with multiple tracks, or if it's one particular one, or if you're doing it with audio tracks or instrument tracks. And if it's still kind of doing it with everything, because it shouldn't be doing that, you could try to hold down Alt Control Shift or Command Option plus Shift as you start the program and try to temporarily disable the preferences. You'll have like it'll allow you to kind of run Cubase in like a diagnostic mode, and try temporarily disabling the preferences and see if that makes a difference. All right. All right. So we see, hi, Greg, question. I have a compressor stock plugin. Can I make a MIDI command to change presets? All right. So let me come over here. I'll just create something here and see if we get it going. All right, so I think if we... Sorry, let me just get this set up again here real quick. Okay. So I think that there is a next preset. All right, so let me just see if we get it to... All right, so if I wanted to, I could just load up different presets here. So I'm just going to go to like navigate, like once we have presets opened, And let's say I'm here. I just want to use we go to navigate down. And we'll apply that. So let's say now that I have the presets open here, I'm just going to use MIDI. And so once I have kind of the presets, I can just hit that button and that will load up. So I just have this set to navigate down, or you could use the down arrow on your computer keyboard, kind of once you have that open. So let me know if that will work for you. So you could do it through MIDI or through different keyboard shortcuts. All right. Hi, Greg. Question. I have can you move the Cubase software app from your hard drive and move that to a different computer and it still works? All right. So, with on Cubase 11 and earlier, you get whatever like the USB E licenser is connected to. It will automatically it'll look for the license on USB E licensors, but with version 12, you could have that installed on up to 3 different computers. So you could just simply, so you could, have it. So I'm not sure what you mean by move the app from your to your hard drive, but if you wanted to, so you could have it installed 3 different computers, and then you could go into the Steinberg Activation Manager and just simply deactivate one license if you needed to put it onto another computer. All right, so we see Mandy Lane, producer, just says Cubase for me sometimes freeze or crash. So Mandy, let me know if it's also like if it's just stock plugins or if you know that it's with a particular plugin. All right, so you see question. Hello, Greg. Hope you are well. Now on Cubase 12, I have a sync problem where Cubase was crashing due to the inactive audio device messing up the sample rate. Only one audio device can be used. So yeah, generally one audio device can be used. So the one thing, make sure, I'm not sure if you're running the dedicated ASIO driver for the device, but, if you have digital connections and if you have another device where it's clocked, where it's connected via a digital audio connection or BNC word clock, you could actually just make sure that the clock source here, when you go to Studio menu, to Studio Setup, to Audio System, select your audio interface. Make sure that you have probably the dedicated ASIO driver here. And then make sure that you have your clock source set probably to internal. Sometimes people may have one sample rate set for Cubase, like 96K. They go to YouTube and are using the same audio interface, and then it has to go back to 48K to play back YouTube or web content. And sometimes the audio interfaces don't like to switch back and forth depending on the settings and on the interface. So check those things out. But if you could let me know which inactive device is messing up the sample rate, that would be helpful for me. So we also see just further question, how can an inactive device mess up the sample rate? So if they're connected digitally. All right, so we see Uno Momento is passing out some Finnish beer. So to complement the ice cream from Michael Teams. Now we just need a good soup recipe from Michael Pierce. So. All right, so we have Steve Cummings. Wonderful to see you on the live streams. Hope you're doing well. Miss seeing you. All right, so we see, hi Greg, in console we can bypass all EQ, insert, send, and channel strips, but we can't bypass the pre-section, especially gain. Why is that? So, it's almost as if the pre-section is kind of before the console, but let me just see if there's some way of, I don't know, a way to bypass it, but we'll see if we can. I'll just add some more audio tracks here. Oh, sorry. My least favorite Mac OS feature. All right. All right, so let's say I'm going to select number of channels here. All right, so I'm going to activate Q-Link, and let's see if we bypass. So if you just click on the pre-section here, I'll just do a quick test on that. Okay, so I'll just do this with the vocal.
You stare
All right, so let's say
down, not a second.
on my vocal, I'm going to add gain here in the vocal.
Something's wrong.
So let's say I just come here, I have this set, so I can just,
Living a lie. How can I
so it doesn't look like that's bypassing it. Yeah, I'll mention that. It seems like that should kind of work the same way as inserts do. But I'll go ahead and mention that to the team to see if that could be brought. So sorry about that. It's a good point. All right, I'm not going to update my Citrix. All right. Yeah, all right. So I see from Daniela says it's Vienna Ensemble Pro Server. So, if there's a, so I'm not sure if there's a, particular question that you have or if it's just how to, so I don't have Vienna on, to show. But, if you have a particular question, I might be able to help out with that. Okay, so we have a question. Hi, Greg. Can you show some basic in frequency, working with vocals and getting a little lost in the plug? Okay, so I'll just go ahead and revert. Okay, so let's say we'll come over to, and I'll put this as an insert. All right, so one of the things that's really helpful is seeing, if you know kind of what the key of the song is really helpful, because you can now come over in frequency. One of the great things, you can say, okay, maybe we're in a key of G, that you could just kind of see the actual frequency here. But if you just go to, okay, I want to go to G4, you could just type in the actual note. Now, one thing that's really helpful for this is being able to have this mode on. So look at the frequency graph here, but so as I'm doing EQing with this on, I'm only hearing the particular frequencies that I'm editing. So if I wanted to just kind of take, so let's say we're playing our vocal here, and now with this turned on, I'm only hearing so that's a really helpful tool, So a lot of times people just kind of roll off low end on vocals, and usually if it's a stereo track, you also have the option of coming over and having this be for left, right, or for working with mid and side. But you don't really it's not applicable for mono sources. But something else that's really helpful is if you have particular frequency ranges as you're kind of working with it. So let's say I want to take frequency 6. We can now put this into dynamics. And also enabling linear phase. But now you could just say, okay, let's come over to our dynamics. So I could apply kind of just compression just on this very specific frequency that I'm working with. So, but most important thing is just kind of using your ears. And there's different global settings you can set, but definitely when you're trying to dial in and kind of really refine that vocal choice, using this little button here and being able to adjust, and then you're hearing exactly what you are adjusting. So try that. All right. Okay, so we have a question. On an audio track, I use an insert effect. How can I render the plugin effect only to an additional track? So, all right, so let's say I have a delay. So let's say I just wanted to come here and I have a delay. So let's say, okay, we'll just put a really awkward delay in a vocal here. All right, so I think maybe if we wanted to apply this, apply the effect to another track, and so let's say if I wanted to come, if I go to edit, and let's say to render in place, and we say render with, let me just, undo that. Sorry. So let's go to render in place, and I'll go to the render settings. So I could just say, let's have the channel settings. And then at this point, we could choose to mute the source tracks, or we could disable them if we wanted to. So now if I wanted to render that particular track, if I don't have it record enabled, so as I listen to this track, we could have all of the effects. And the original track is just muted. So there's other options where we could choose to get rid of the tracks, or if you wanted to keep it there. So we have kind of our original source tracks here. And now we have rendered with the inserts. So let me know if I understood correctly. All right, so I think we finally have AJ's question. Okay, so it says, the issues I'm having is this. When I add an instrument or create a MIDI out, the fader in the console is all the way down, but the sound is so loud, almost burst my ears. All right, so let's just do a new project. Okay, so let's come here to my mix console, and I'll hide my input channels. All right, so when I add an instrument track, let's say for Retrolog, we get one new fader added. So this is our MIDI volume for that track. So if I wanted to, I could play that. Now, if I add, so if I come over here, let's say if I start by going to my instrument rack and I add a rack instrument, we'll get asked if we want to create a MIDI track that's assigned to that rack instrument. So now that we do that, I have Retrolog playing, but we see that we have a MIDI. So this is the audio volume, like the return channel. And then we have this volume is the MIDI CC volume. So when you start with a MIDI track that's routed to a virtual instrument, you'll get a fader for MIDI volume, and you'll get a fader for the audio return channel of that. Some people will just come over and choose to hide MIDI volume. So if you're working with instrument tracks, you're going to have one unified fader. If you're working with MIDI tracks, being that MIDI could, go to an external instrument or could go to a virtual instrument, you'll also get a MIDI fader, and that MIDI fader will be down because it's probably going to favor automation using the audio. But if you had MIDI CC7 data, at that point, let's just come over here. And if I have main volume messages as we would play back the part, and we go to the mix console, I think we'll see that but we could just simply have this be the MIDI volume right there. So that's why there's two different ones. So, but if you could let us know if you're starting with an instrument or a MIDI track. right. All right, still. Okay, going through, reading through more questions here. Okay, so we have it says, I have an issue. I'm new to Cubase. When I want to listen to a sample, it doesn't work. Okay, so let's say if I come over to my different sample libraries here, and I'll just get some audio ones. So if you wanted to be able to audition kind of your different samples, really what you should do is make sure when you go to your audio connections that you probably have outputs connected here, but try going to your control room and right click and you'll see add monitor and set up your audio interface outputs, your monitoring path through the control room. And then as we come over here, you could just be able to preview all of your different samples like so. And also see in our comment that you could make sure that the volume control here is up. Okay, just we see Cap Tenergy music on. We see PZ136. I have to say not P-Zone 36. So, all right. Okay. Okay, so we have Jay Hatchie checking in from Ireland. All right, and we have Val Lee checking in from Austria. Thanks for joining us. All right, so we just see from AJ Soundbites, it just says, is dangerous. My ears were ringing for a while. So, I don't think Cubase is necessarily sending out like a huge, spike of audio, but, check your volume as well, your monitoring volume. So I'm not sure if you're using control room or not, or if you were doing virtual instruments or just MIDI, an instrument track, or going directly to all right, so we're just saying from Daniela, special because Dolby is married somehow with Avid Pro Tools, and Avid will not get 1 cent from me. So, you could definitely do all your Dolby Atmos mixes. It's like your discussion that, you could use, any audio interface that has multiple outputs, to feed your monitoring system. So it doesn't have to be a RedNet or a Dante. A lot of people use that because it's scalable. But, I think even at the recent NAMM show in California in June, Dolby was, recommending Cubase and Nuendo for most of the users. Wonderful to see Gareth on the live stream, just saying Retrolog is a beast. Okay, so I think this is from the question about the control room. So just saying, in my control room, the monitor is seated on my soundboard on Focusrite 8i6. So, check to make sure that you have, the routings correct. So, but if it's kind of playing back and you have that going through, make sure that this is the volume is set here as well, but that should be working for you. All right, so you just see I use the GSR24M and the Tascam US 2000 was messing up the sample rate even though it wasn't selected. The US 2000 is connected to the studio monitors, my mixers, line output, physical. All right, let me just see if... Okay, so it's okay. So you see, it was a misconnection for that. So let's just go back. So I think this is with the messing up sample rate. It says I used the GSR24M and the Tascam US 2000. I was messing up the sample rate though, even though it wasn't selected. US 2000 is connected to the studio monitors, my mixers, line output, physical con. So I just wonder if they're... Sometimes if you have two USB, I think that it's the GSR24M might be like a USB mixer, but maybe they're using the same driver architecture for both devices, and and maybe that's conflicting. So if you're not using the GSR24M, see what happens if or if you're not using one of them, if you disconnect the computer. Sometimes, if you have multiple, like a company like Yamaha will have URC drivers that will work for the UR22C, UR44C, UR816C. It's kind of a unified driver. So maybe it's a driver conflict between the two different devices. All right, so we just see from AJ Soundbites about his audio for instruments. Says it happens when I put a new instrument or MIDI track in. This happens after I've been working for over 30 minutes on the project, and that all of a sudden it seems to happen. So, check to see if it's like a particular instrument. Sometimes I've seen some plugins, like when they're running in demo mode, may kind of, send a burst of noise or something like that. But I'm not sure if it's anything that Cubase is doing. So let's see if it's, if it's happening with all instruments. If you try using all stock instruments, if you have the same behavior, AJ Soundbites, I know you may have to wait for it, but it could be down to one particular plugin. But I don't think there's anything in Cubase that's just kind of outputting a bunch of different, loud sounds going out of your system like that. Okay, Michael Teams wants people to whack the like button. Okay, so you see a question. In external machine with Cubase Pro 12, in the plugin list occurs vendor/other plugin names. Why separation other occurs there, and how can I get rid of it? All right, so if you don't want to necessarily... Okay, so I think if we come over, let's say, to our plugin manager... Okay, so let's say if we're here, we'll see that we have like, so we could switch this based on vendor or in the plugin manager by category. So if what you could do if you wanted to change this, so let's say I didn't like this particular other category here for, let's say, for Loop Mash FX, is we could, at this point, let's duplicate our existing plugin manager. So we're going to make a new collection. So we're going to click on this little plus sign, and we'll copy the current collection. So we'll just call this Harry. And let's say at this point, I wanted to have this plugin just on its own and not in an other category. So now if we wanted to reorganize, I could just have no other category, and you could just come over here and drag and drop all the plugins over and organize them as you see fit. If you wanted to make your own folder, I can now select the number of plugins and say, okay, I want these into the Harry folder. And so you could organize everything as you want using, just by creating a VST plugin collection. So let me know if that helps, Harry. Okay, you see Michael Teams just wanting to whack the like button. So everyone do that. Yeah, I see just a comment about Brian, about Absinthe being kind of dropped from Brian Clevenger, so that was kind of a shame. Okay, so let me see. I think it might be at the end of questions. I know we had some that were mailed in. See if there's any questions before we go to some that were mailed in advance. Thanks for all the great questions. Let me just... All right, so let me go to some of our questions that were mailed in advance. All right, so we have a question. Hi, Greg. Not a question for this forum. Can I have two sound cards? The other for Windows system, example, to listen to YouTube. Is the OBS app required to accomplish this? So you could have, multiple sound cards in, for Mac or PC, and generally, I always find it kind of a helpful. I like to have a separate audio sound, a separate sound card. So you could definitely use that, one audio interface for Cubase with an ASIO driver and another sound card that's kind of utilized for operating system sounds for like web streaming and YouTube and being able to listen to that. You don't need OBS to utilize that. So when OBS is kind of used, it is often for broadcasting or recording different sources. So, I use OBS, and I'll show it to you guys here. So I use OBS just to transmit into the streaming software for YouTube. So, but for playing back YouTube, you don't have to, do anything special. But if you wanted to transmit for a live stream, that's what OBS is often used to do. So, all right, so we have a question. I'm making an orchestral template using Iconica Opus and East West Hollywood Orchestra instruments, approximately 250 tracks. If I assign a separate Hallian Sonic instance to each instrument, I'm using 60 gigabytes of memory. Therefore, I decided to load one Hallian Sonic for 16 instruments to see if that method will save RAM. So here's the question. Okay. After assigning 16 instruments in Hallian Sonic, I had 15 MIDI tracks, and then I need to name each MIDI track. Is there a quick way to name each MIDI track the same as the instruments in Hallian Sonic? Currently, I'm using this workaround, but it is very tedious. Right-click on the voice in Hallian Sonic, select Rename Program, then Command-C to copy, double-click the MIDI track name, Command-V. It works, but it's very time-consuming. I try to write a macro, but there's no Option key in commands for Rename Program. So let's see if there's a way to... Let me just take a look, see if there's a way of renaming the tracks here. All right, so let's try the edit rename. All right, I don't think that's it. All right, let me just look, see if there's any, might be. All right, so there's Option, Shift R for rename. Okay, so there is a rename selected track that might help with this that you could utilize for a macro. So try rename. Yeah, so it's not necessarily rename the program, but to rename the selected event. Now, sometimes if you're doing it with, one thing that you might want to try is first to make sure that you go to your preferences, You might be able to initially save a lot of memory by going to VST, and when you go to plugins, to suspend VST plugin processing when no audio signals are received. And that way, if there's no activity going on that's being generated by particular channels, that would actually take a lot of the processing away. It may not affect RAM as much, but that's something to try. But try the rename selected tracks. When working with instrument tracks, which is unfortunately not kind of what you're doing, we could come over, say, okay, I want my Hallian Sonic SE. And then let's say we get to Iconica, that now if I just drag this over, that will automatically kind of keep, the name, occurred, that will maintain the name when we drag it over, but we know exactly what sound is going to be loaded. So let me, so if you make track presets, you could do that, but that's not going to probably save you much time. One other thing that you could do as you're kind of naming particular tracks. So let's say I have a Hallian Sonic SE. Okay, and so let's say I have this sound here in channel 1. Let's go to Iconica. So I'll just load up a couple of other instruments. So something that may also take a little bit of tedium out. Let's say if I add three MIDI tracks. Now, so when I come, I could just look at this and say, okay, we're going to type in void spaces, maybe without having to navigate to copy and paste. And then hit the tab key, and that will take you to the naming field for the next track. So as you just kind of hit the tab key, you could just kind of name the tracks. And as we're here, we could see which track, as I select the different tracks in Hallian, we could see what track is actually being selected. So if we just have my edit menu, I could just kind of click here. And so as we name tracks, as we selected different tracks, we could see what is actually selected as well. So that may speed things up a little bit, but if it's not quite as, but once you create your template once, it should stick, and it'll be preserved, so you don't have to do it every time. All right, so we had a question. Hi, Greg. Correlation between pool window and project window. What is the easiest way to identify a wave event with the pool window? It'd be desirable if I marked an event so that it could be marked in the pool and vice versa. All right, so I think we could select particular events in the pool and have it shown in the actual and have it shown in the project. Okay, so let's say I open up the pool window. So we go to media, to the pool window. So let's say I just want to select a guitar part. So if I right click, we can now just say, I think there's, we'll see select in project. So now anytime that I right click I could just say select in project and that would automatically show it. So that's one way of doing it, but I don't think that there's a way to take this particular file and to show it in the pool. I'll just take a quick look again just to make sure. Yeah, so I don't know of a way to kind of have those two kind of synced, but but if you wanted to, and this is probably more common, just say right click and select in project, and then you could come over and have the event selected. But I don't know of a way to take this, but generally, once we see the name of the track, you could easily search it alphabetically here in the pool. So give that a try. Okay, so we had a question. Isotope makes a useful metering plugin called Tonal Balance Control 2. Just in case you're not familiar with it, here's a link to the product page, which was nice for you to send. The metering can be displayed in 4 separate bands or in more continuous frequency curve. It can be calibrated quite substantially. There are also presets for various genres. It's very convenient, especially for mastering in WaveLab. Furthermore, it can control isotope plugins, but I'm only interested in the metering portion of the plugin. Any way the information and the way the information is presented to the user. So the question is, does Supervision contain any equivalent functionality for the tonal balance control? If not, could you please pass this on as a feature request? I'm sure it'd be appreciated. So, I think the tonal balance, I see that, that is kind of doing more like extract, like almost like a, dynamics and maybe EQ learning. So there's, not an equivalent in Supervision where we could divide the frequencies like that. But, if you wanted to do some of the same functionality for kind of like tonal matching, you could do it in Spectral Layers Pro. But there's also, if you get to EQ, to the curve EQ, you have the ability of kind of learning frequencies from one file and applying it to another. But I'll pass along as a feature request for being able to break apart the different zones. I think all the metering for frequencies that we see in Spectral Layers is going to be kind of full bandwidth for our metering. So yeah, so I don't see like for any of the spectral to do that, but I'll pass it along as a feature request. All right, so I had a question. I own both Cubase 12 Pro and 11 Pro. My 11 Pro loads projects with heavy VSTs like Omnisphere in seconds and rarely crashes. It's quite stable. My 12 Pro loads projects really slow. It takes half a minute to load heavy VSTs and crashes all the time. I also noticed that the Cubase logo on the top left corner is not quite whole, but is missing the bottom part where it's online images and online video tutorials. I've watched the logos full and middle of the white panel. Any ideas of what could be wrong with my Cubase Pro 12? I uninstalled and installed again, but the issues remain. So one thing I would do is when you go from Cubase 11 to Cubase 12 Pro, it's actually going to take the different license, the different preferences over. So try holding down your Command Option Shift or Alt Control Shift, and try running it without any of the preferences from version 11 migrating to version 12. So see if you could rule that out. Another thing to check is that you have all the same settings when we go into the audio system. So there's a lot of different functions here under the advanced, so make sure that you have multi-processing, activate ASIO guard, that if you're on Windows, that you have the power plan, the Steinberg power scheme selected. So those things may not carry over from one version to the next and can make a big difference on how those particular projects are loaded. Sometimes, video display drivers can cause problems in one version and not the other. So, if you have like an NVIDIA, if you're on Windows and have an NVIDIA driver, display driver, check to see if you could run it. There's, I think, a studio mode versus gaming mode, and, check down that path as well. That causes a lot of kind of random issues like you describe. All right. So we have a question. My name is Marissa Ruperto. I have recently purchased Cubase Artist 12 in the hopes that I can work on some projects for someone I'm working with. He works in Nuendo 11, and I heard that you can switch between Cubase and Nuendo. I watched your video from a year ago hoping it would help, but I've gotten so far has just been a warning saying this is a Nuendo file. This program cannot open it. Is there a way that I can work with the new Cubase, or do I have my work cut out for me? Haha. Thank you for your time and consideration. So, the files are compatible. A Nuendo project file is called has an extension of a .npr, like Nuendo project. Cubase is a .cpr. And that's a Cubase project. So when I wanted to come over on, let's say on Mac, and I wanted to open a Nuendo project, I would just come over. All right, so let's say I want to come over here to Nuendo 12, and on the Mac platform, I could just, freely open that up right there. Excuse me. Now, on the Windows platform, so there's my Nuendo project directly loaded over here. On the Windows platform, you may just have to click on Open, and then you'll see files of type, like over on the bottom right-hand corner of the dialog box. There you could say, okay, open a .cpr file, open a .npr file, or open .cpr.npr file. So that may default, if you're on a Windows platform, to just see .cpr files. So at this point, what you want to do is just select, open up the .npr file, and then that should freely open it up. So I freely open up Cubase projects in Nuendo and Nuendo projects in Cubase. So you should be fine, Marissa. All right. All right, so I think that's all the questions we had mailed in. We just jump back to our live questions. If you've learned something new, make sure that you actually hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. All right, back to my chat. All right, so I just see from Ken Coleman, he had a question in the chat. Let me see if I could go back and see if I missed it. Sorry if I did miss it. Let me just scroll back. But if you want to ask your question again, Ken, you could type it in. All right, I don't see the question, Ken, but if you asked one, just feel free to ask it again. All right, so a question from Jay from Connecticut. Out of curiosity, does Yamaha manufacture / distribute small MIDI controllers with MPE functionality? I'm weighing exploration of MPE device catalyzed analog-based, physically modeled instrument. So currently, I don't think Yamaha has any MIDI controllers that do MPE. So maybe we'll see some in the future. But currently they don't have anything on the market that's doing MPE yet. Okay, so you see Ken Coleman just mentioned that he asked a question about Melodyne. So yeah, if you want to ask the question again, I didn't see it. Sorry if I missed it. It seems like we had a couple of people whose questions aren't coming through. Okay, so I see Jazz Dude was kind enough to repeat the question. So is there any advantage of the new Melodyne Essential plugin instead of the usual Cubase Very Audio? So I haven't really played around with the Melodyne Essential plugin. So I think Very Audio is quite advanced and the integration is very deep. But I think, we just wanted to, work on marketing collaboration with other companies. So, and that's why we kind of offer that as an option. I think that as a lot of people have both of them, that they, really appreciate their Very Audio as well for tight integration. So I'm not sure if the Melodyne Essential does polyphonic stuff, but if it does, that would be one distinction between it. All right, so we see a question. How to make markers stay in sync with tempo changes. All right, let me just go to a different project. All right, so let's say we have marker tracks. Okay, and I'll just switch this to... All right, so let's say my tempo here is 76 beats or 75 beats a minute. Okay, so I'm going to just go ahead and drop in a marker track. Okay, so let's say as we work on this now, so one of the things that let's say if I adjust my tempo down, so one of the things that you might want to do on the marker tracks themselves, we could go to track control settings, and then we could see toggle time base, and this is probably hidden. So I'm going to take this and put it into the visible area here. So marker tracks can be set to musical mode and linear mode. So let's say I go back to 75 beats a minute. So what we want to do is, let's say if we have our marker track in linear mode, which I believe is the default, that now as I adjust my tempo track, the markers are moving. So you can see our markers move. Now if I put this into linear musical mode, as I adjust the marker tracks, as I adjust the tempo, the marker tracks will stay the same. So once again, go to the marker track, right click, And you want to go to track control settings. If you don't see that, go to hidden controls, and then you want to toggle time base. We want to just add that on so that we could see that indivisible, and then make sure that the icon for the toggle looks like a quarter note as opposed to a musical clock, like a stopwatch, like a clock here. So give that a try. All right, so let me just reading through different comments. All right, so we see from Frequency just saying, thanks again, Greg, the Cubase importer app worked. All right, that's great. So you could always kind of, the intention is that you could, work with Cubase on your phone, work on a track, and then if you need to take it into Cubase to add, more capabilities or, work with different plugins in your studio environment, that you could have that. All right, so we just see a question. Is there a way to add a delay before the Arpeggi MIDI insert function? I'd like to start the Arpeggi after, say, 3 or 4 seconds of a VST normal play trigger. Thanks. All right, so let's go ahead and give it a shot here. We might be able to do it with the Arpeggi SX. Okay, so let's say I have this little pattern here, and let's say I just want to have a measure of silence here. So as we play it, okay, so let's see if we can get this to work where we don't have the arpeggiator play at the beginning. So let's get to our MIDI inserts. I'll select this. Let's go to Arpeggi SX. And Arpeggi SX has this feature where we could actually kind of drag and drop a sequence in. So let's see. Okay, so now we have this sequence dragged in. So I'll just hit a note now. All right, so let me just... Okay, so I'll just kind of play. right, so let's see if I trigger continuously. So it seems like it goes straight to the very first note. But let's say, one of the things that we could do also, all right, so I'm going to just do a quick, so it looks like it's not going to play rest. It's going to start with a pitch. So let's say if I just wanted to come, maybe to get the same effect at the end. So let's say, sorry, wrong. All right, so say I have my 3 notes in here. So if let's say we have our Apache here, but one thing you might be able to do is, let's say I wanted these notes to hold and I wanted the arpeggiators to kick in here. Let's see if I select that event and choose freeze MIDI modifiers. It does it for all of the events. So it looks like it's going to take the arpeggiator. So I could play around with it some more, but it looks like it's always going to start at the notes as opposed to like a rest. But let me just see if there's any other play modes when we have maybe a sequence. Yeah, so I don't see a way of doing that, but I could play around with it a little more if you want to email me at clubcubase@steinberg.de. All right, so we see is question number 2. I have LE11. Is Pro really only $59 to upgrade to? So I think Pro is $59 to upgrade to from Pro 11 to Pro 12. So, I think the terminology, instead of like an update from LE11 to, you could check just to make sure on the Steinberg website, but that would be an upgrade. So let me just check what the price is in the US. So we want to do updates and upgrades. So it looks like from upgrading from that would be $299 on sale as opposed to $499. So still a great deal. But I think if you have a Cubase, update from Pro 11, that's $59. But since it's the LE, which is less of an initial investment, as it's just kind of comes with hardware. That's going to be $299 is what it looks like. All right, reading through comments. Okay, just still reading through. All right, so we see a question by Zounds by Timo. How do you get the playhead cursor to scroll with the track? Okay. Okay, just load up a different project. Okay. Okay, so we see how do you get the playhead cursor to scroll with the track. So let's say we're playing along here. All right, so if you click on to follow, so if we just kind of click right here, so if this is off, when it gets to the end, it just kind of keeps playing. If this is enabled, when it gets to the end, it'll re-scroll. Sorry, here. So when it's enabled, let's say I have it zoomed in. Or if we wanted it to be a stationary cursor, where everything is constantly moving. So, and to kind of turn it on and off, you can just hit F, like for follow. So page scroll is kind of the most common, I think, the default mode. So as we get to the end of the page, so let me know if that's what you're looking for. All right, so Gareth is also just saying, don't forget you've got Fire the Clip in a new deal, brilliant clipper. All right, and Gareth's playhead is cursed apparently. All right, we see kind words from Gareth saying, big shout out to Greg, tirelessly illuminating the dark recesses of the Cubaseteer's zombie-like brains. So. And Gareth also says, Greg is what we dream about when we imagine a perfect world. So, well, that's very kind. And Spike Williams says, I'm waiting for the day Greg Craxton addresses us as puny humans. So I always will remember, like, when I got my first, I think it was an Elisa's HR16, and, the guy gave me a demo at the store, and then, seemed like I had a good handle on it, then got home, and at that point couldn't, was totally lost. So anytime someone is answering, like, or asking a really basic question, I remember how I felt trying to, going back to the store and trying to get help after I grinded the guy down for, like, 40% off his price. So I always will be very cognizant of that. So. Okay, so we see, I saw something of a possibility to solve it from the Cubase index using a MIDI track to add a modifier onto an instrument track. Let me see if I could. Let me just look, trying to remember what the initial questions, okay, this is about the Apache MIDI insert functions. Like start. Okay, let me just see. Yeah, so I think with that, one of the things that you could do. I'll just do a new project here quickly. And this is with kind of the arpeggio, getting it started at a different rate. So, but with a MIDI track, so let's say I add an instrument rack. All right, I'll take off this arpeggiator here. Sorry for hitting the mic. All right. And I'm going to add. So now. Okay, so now, so what this would allow you to do, and you may have seen this in the Cubase index, where I have, if I'm starting with MIDI tracks, I can take this track and then we have MIDI sends. So I can say, I want to take the Apache, let's say the Apache plugin here, but send it to Retrolog. So now when I play a chord on the Rhodes, it's just going to arpeggiate. But I don't think it will delay. So, but not sure if that's helpful for delaying kind of the actual events that are going on. So you might have to write it out and then mute the different events. But I'll see if I can play around with it a little more over the weekend. All right. So wonderful to see the artist known as Love checking in from New York. Okay, so we see a question. I bought VST Live and it came with Pad Shop 2 and Retrolog, but neither of these will open in Cubase. Is there something I need to do so those VSTs work? So generally, when you buy that, it's going to be tied to the application, but Retrolog and PadShop both come with Cubase, depending which version you have. So if you have like Cubase Artist or Cubase Pro, you'll have PadShop and Retrolog. So if you haven't gotten those, it could be just that you have to download it from the Steinberg download assistant. But if you have like, Cubase Pro, those are licensed with the system, and could be a lot of times when people go to the Steinberg download manager that they don't go through the whole list and get all the different content and plugins and instruments that they're entitled to. So as soon as we go to the download manager, let's say if you go to Cubase 12 and or Cubase 11, you'd get the same thing, or Cubase 10, 10.5. I think 10 might have had PadShop 1. But if you just kind of scroll down, you can see that you'll have Retrolog and PadShop as available downloads. So they come with a lot of versions of Cubase as is. So it's not going to necessarily run it inside of Cubase once you do that, because the license you have is for running in VST Live. But if you have Cubase, then you probably have it. And if you don't see it, just download it from the Steinberg download assistant. All right, so we see the Heartbreak Time Machine says the like button has been smashed. All right, and Gareth says he's the same. All right. Maybe about something else. All right. All right, so we have a question. I upgraded to Cubase Pro 12 from Pro 10.5. Is there an issue skipping version 11? No, it just, you may have, go back and check out all of, if you go to the YouTube channel, check out all the new features that were in Cubase 11. So sometimes when people when they skip a version, they go 10.5 to 12, they look at all the new features in 12. But make sure you go back and look at all the new features that came in Cubase 11 as well. So review some of those videos because there's a lot of great stuff that gets added in each version. So make sure that you have, you're not just like, super excited about all the new stuff that you are, that came in 12, was introduced in 12, but, make sure that you do all the stuff in Cubase 11 as well. All right, so we see suggestion or question. It would be great if it would be possible to activate solo of a track by selecting an event instead of selecting a track. All right, so let's take a look. All right, so it's all right, we may be able to do this utilizing a couple of preferences working together. So let's get to editing, project and mix console. So you say select, let's see. Okay, so let's say track selection follows event selection from editing. All right, so once we have that done, we could just come over here. That's going to select the track. So now, if I'm here, when I hit solo. So if I select this event and then hit solo, so let's see if we could do it with to have that automatically select. So there's the enable solo on selected track. So so that way you could just come here. Let me know if this would make sense. So if I come here and then solo.
Hermanos, sembremos la unidad. Solo Dios nos podrá juzgar. Seas rico.
So I'm not sure if you wanted it to solo as soon as it was selected or not, but maybe if you could let me know if that's helpful. But I'm sure you could build a macro to do that as well. All right, so a question. Is it possible to set Q-Link in the mixer activated as default? It's annoying, always have to activate it after every restart. Thank you very much for your time. So I don't think so, and it could be, that could lead to a lot of unintended consequences, of if you just selected, if you had multiple channels selected and then you moved one, that all of them, and of course, I had to pick the ones that were grouped together. But, if I wanted to take, if I just have, multiple things selected independently, let me just, let's say I just have these selected and I wanted to move one other fader that, those may not, I may not necessarily want things to be defaultly linked, and you could always hold down Alt or Option plus Shift to turn it on. But there could be a lot of bad consequences. I think, when you get into, okay, I'm just adjusting an EQ on one track, would that do it for every selected track without you realizing it if it was on by default? So I think it's one of those things, and I could pass it on as a feature request, but it's, I think, one of those things that they actually should be initiated or instantiated by the user intentionally. But I understand if you'd always want it to be on, but that could lead to a lot of unintentional settings. All right, so we see a nice comment from Gerald Ely. Says, thank you for the time and effort you put into this group, Greg. So thank you. You're welcome. Just glad it's helpful for people. We want people to be able to use their software better. All right, we're seeing Gregalities that have been giving to Gareth, so that's good. See, the Heartbreak Time Machine says 90% of DAW users typically don't use more than 10% of their DAW features. But sometimes people use different 10%. So having that whole other percentage of stuff that you don't use that's so critical to someone else is really important. So. All right, so we see, is there a plugin that makes my sound like a Sound Blaster 16? Ha ha ha. So probably what you could do if you had to do that is I would check out maybe like Grungelizer. I know this is probably in jest, but so here we could actually add hum. So that's always an oldie, but in a goodie. And you could have hum at 50 or 60 cycles. So American hum or US hum or European hum rather. All right. So we see question, how do you delete a temporary e-license? So I think if you go, once it's kind of been, once the e-license has kind of run its course, like in a trial version, that it shouldn't necessarily interfere. I think on the Windows platform, and you could probably Google this, I'm not sure if it's officially supported, but I've seen discussion of some people going into like the registry and going into, but there's kind of like a software way of getting rid of the licenses. It may not work on Mac, but I think that there is a way on the registry, so it's probably not officially supported. And as a representative of the company, I shouldn't tell you to do that, but if you wanted to be adventurous, you may be able to try that. Okay, so we see Guitar Play-Alongs says hello from Switzerland. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for all the great tips. And thanks for being a part of the live stream. Always want to go to Switzerland so badly. Haven't been there yet, so I'm envious you get to live there. All right, so we see I see a comment, VST Live allows me to export to Cubase, but due to VST licensing, currently LE, I can't open up the live project in Cubase. You see continued, let me see if I can. So I haven't tried it in LE, but I know that, if we do it inside of, what you may be able to do is just come over here and check out the import, and then you'll see the VST Live directly there. So you could import the VST Live project there. So I haven't tried it on Cubase LE, but it is kind of a subset of features. So if you have a chance to, take advantage of the current promotion, so take advantage of that. All right. All right. So we see from Ben says, wow, thank you, Greg. You just saved hours of my life. You answered my question about the track solo from events. So it's good. I'm glad that helped. There's all sorts of little preferences like that make a big difference. So, and thanks for reminding me what the topic was. Sometimes I get a comment, it's like, oh, it's so great, and I have to like scroll back up, from 30 minutes before or something and find what the context was. So thank you for providing the context for that comment. All right, so we say permission to rip those gregalities off, Sergi. So you can rip them off, but you have to send me tracks to play bass on. So I'm missing playing bass on tracks. So you'll have to send me some new songs and projects. So see, Jazz Dude saying European hum sounds better. So it really depends on the key of the song, I think. So. All right, so we see Nick is having to head off early tonight. So thanks for joining us and look forward to seeing you on Tuesday's live stream. Okay. All right, just reading through more comments. Thanks for all the great discussion. All right, so we see from the Heartbreak Time Machine, thank you, Greg, for last week's help with the Arranger track. A feature I didn't know about has totally changed how I use this DAW. Amazed, man. So that's great. All right, so we have a question. I often change parameters accidentally when rolling the middle mouse button just to scroll up the screen. Any way of deactivating options so it doesn't happen anymore? So a lot of times it's still, and I've asked for kind of, the capability of having like the mixer not, necessarily, a way to uncheck mouse things, or parameters. So a lot of times if you do it in the mix console, just come right here and you have an undo history for the mix console. And this is where I often hear it. And this even goes for plugins or settings. So if I come right over here and I adjust all this, I can now just go right back to square one. And so there is, if it's in the mix console, whereas I often hear about it, you could also just hit Alt or Option plus Z or Alt or Option plus Shift plus Z to undo and redo parameters that may have been changed in a mixer. But there isn't like a filter, mouse scroll wheel movements. So. All right. All right, so you see Michael Teams says we're working on more tracks for me to play bass on, so looking forward to it. So just see, I think it's directed to me from Jazz Dude. I watched a TV show Pistols. I watched it last week. I had a good time, so I'll see if I can find it. All right, so we have Tom Vandal. Hello, I'm new to Cubase, coming from Logic. Can I ask a maybe stupid question? Of course, you can ask any question. Doesn't, ask any question that you want. So the only bad question is not asking one if you have. Okay. Okay, so I see from Spike Williams, says super minor gripe. When I create a new folder in Cubase 12, once created, it jumps to alphabetical order rather than staying under the cursor. So I had to keep opening up the wrong folder. It's counterintuitive. All right, so let me see if it's this folder. So let's say new project, create empty, let's say new folder. All right, I'll just get to my documents here. Okay, so let's say I do new project, create folder. Okay, so I'm just going to call this Spike. So then the Spike folder is, so it jumps to alphabetical order rather than staying under the cursor. So I keep opening up the wrong folder. It's counterintuitive. So on mine, if this is the same folder, you know, it selected that. And then when I hit open, it goes to that folder. I'm not sure if it's maybe folders here. I don't think so, but let's. So I don't think that has the alphabetizing. So, but mine had selected it. I think it's the same on Windows. But let me know if I misunderstood. Okay, so we see when edit guitars on beat on 8th to the grid. What about milliseconds and link? Thank you. Okay. I'll pull up Gareth's favorite project here. Okay, so let's say I'm like editing guitars to the grid, so I'll just switch it to kind of free warp. All right, so right now my master time is set to bars and beats. So let's say I will I'll just put some free warp markers in here. All right, so now I can move these around, and if we choose to have snap turned on, I could have these kind of automatically snap to our grid here, so it'll just kind of almost like falling into a little canyon here. We'll just kind of snap. But let's say if I switch my master time here to seconds, I could move this point, and let's say I just wanted this point to be right here on seconds. At this point, we could have it automatically snap to seconds, but it's really dependent on whatever the master time format is. So if we come here to measure 6, and measure 6 is 10 seconds, that now if I wanted to snap to like half seconds here or 2 seconds, it'll just kind of snap based on whatever your master time resolution is. So let me know if that is helpful. All right, so we see Ben Billen or Billion has to take off. So thanks for joining us today. All right, so we see from Frankie, great thanks. I did not know about the undo feature. I thought it was only for edits. Great news. That's great. Okay, so we see Tom Vandal's question. So what do I have to do to get the timeline split in sections so that my marker and reference tracks will always be visible anytime? Okay, so really all we have to do, let's say I have like my chord track, and let's say I'll add a marker track. Okay, so to do this, you'll see that it's very subtle, but if we come over to this right-hand corner here, you'll see this little divide track list function. So when I do that, it'll now divide kind of our track list, and we could have different tracks on top that we could scroll independently, but I could have my markers, signature track, whatever, always remain resident at top. And if we wanted to stop that, once we activate it, you can see right here below the track division that we could click, and now that would go where there's no kind of anchored tracks, or tracks will be anchored just by clicking here again. So that way your markers, chord tracks, or vocals, whatever track, and if you wanted to just move a track up to the top, you could do that as well. So this way we could scroll independently on our different tracks. See, Benny's just saying, thanks, Greg, for all the help over these years. Have learned an incredible amount thanks to you. Well, thank you for the kind words. I'm just glad I could be helpful. Okay, so we see a clarification from Spike Williams about, so sorry, Greg, it's when I'm saving project to new folder on Windows. So let's try that as well. So I'm going to do backup project. All right, so let's come over to new folder. Okay, and we'll call this Spike 2. All right, so it's still selected here. And then, hitting OK. So it seems like it's the same behavior, but I'll try it on my Windows machine after the live stream, maybe later tonight, and see if it's different on Windows, but it seems to still be selected. All right, so we see from Tom Van Dahl, thanks, that's it, thank you. So you're welcome, and welcome to being a new Cubase user, a new Steinberg user, and we hope to see you many on many live streams, and reach out if we could ever help you transition so you're getting the most out of your Cubase. All right, so we have 2 quick questions. How many track divisions are possible? So there's only 2 divisions like this that are possible in the project window. So that's all there is currently. So, and I guess if we have our bottom zone here, we could consider that a 3rd region. So if we wanted to, for instance, look at the editor, we could come over here, look at the editor, but 2 main like track divisions. All right, another question. Is there a way to open a project window into an outside window, like the many mix options, in case I missed a feature? So currently there's one project window, but we've had some composers that kind of asked for something similar. So I think it's a pretty clever idea. Very much in the same thought of, being able to see different components in, for mix consoles, that maybe you could split up the project window, but currently it's one single project window. All right, we'll see how we're doing on time. So I think I'm caught up with questions. We'll see if there's more questions that sneak in. I want to thank everyone for all the wonderful questions. Hope that everyone has learned a tip or trick, and it's wonderful to see so many new people on the live stream. And for people who are attending for the first time, we do these on Tuesdays and Fridays, starting at 1 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time. And if you have questions in advance, you could always send them to clubcubase@steinberg.de. All right. So we see next question. In Logic, it is possible to open a project in the Logic browser. Then you can see all the tracks inside the project. You can then drag and drop them into your active project. Is that possible? So it may be a different approach. So one way of doing this is to say, okay, I want to import tracks from project. And we could select a particular project here. And I could select all these, or if we wanted to send them to new tracks, we could copy over events and parts or not. So if I wanted to get all the mixer and EQ and plugin settings, or if I don't want to copy the automation over, we could do that. So that's kind of one method of doing it. So we could import another way, but you can't necessarily drag. But if you wanted to kind of drag and drop projects, really all you'd have to do is say, okay, I want it to come to this project. And if I said, okay, I really want these particular events from this project over, we could drag and drop these. I'll make this the active project. So you can have multiple projects open simultaneously, but we could have one active project. So I could just drag and drop multiple audio files from one project, directly into another project. So if I wanted to come and say, okay, I like this file, we could just drag and drop it right into projects. So you could do that for multiple events as well. See, nice comment from Spike Williams. Thanks for all the amazing knowledge you share with us, puny humans. It's much appreciated. So everyone kind of started off with, not understanding, how everything worked. So I've just been lost earlier than other people. So help people kind of guide them along the path. So. All right, wonderful to see Agent K giving me my gold trophy for reaching the end of questions within 4 hours. So I appreciate that. So great to see you on. Appreciate everything that you and Jazz do for moderation. And we've been a couple of live streams without any weird bots. So I don't want to jinx it. Okay, so we see from Tom Van Dahl, thanks to the first solution as well as searching. Thank you. It's really helpful. So that's great. Agent K is good at lurking and working, so that's always a good, clever tactic. All right, we'll see if more questions come in. All right, so we have Scott Cup saying hello to everyone. Thanks for joining today. If you have any questions, get them in. I think we're kind of at most of the questions that were asked, but feel free to get any of your questions if you have, Scott, before we wrap up. And we see that Scott just finished a session. So we see Jazz Dude says you can search the 19,000 indexed Cubase Hangout questions for the last 2 years. So I think that we're on, I think this is our 240th live stream we've done since pandemic started. So maybe we'll do something special for 250th episode. So, but I think we're past 20,000 questions now. It's kind of crazy. All right, I'll wait just another minute. Okay, so we see Scott doesn't have any questions, just observing. So we'll see if there's any more questions that sneak in. If not, we'll wrap up. I want everyone to have a wonderful weekend. I'm going to be going to my son's school picnic tonight, so looking forward to that. So my the index may be an hour or two later than normal, but it should be up late tonight. And we want everyone to have a wonderful weekend, and please stay safe and healthy. And once again, our thoughts are out for everyone in the UK. Sorry for the passing of Queen Elizabeth. You know, that's a cultural icon for the whole world. So, all right, we'll see if there's any more. If not, we'll wrap up a little bit early. All right, so with that, we'll see everyone again on Tuesday. And if you have questions in advance, please send them to clubcubase@steinberg.de. Okay, so we see Steve Cummings just discovered the ability to create an audio or MIDI file from the internal click. Could you please show that feature? Certainly, Steve. Only for you. All right, so I'll activate this. So for those who don't know, so let's say even, so we have a tempo track here going on. So if I have an event selected and we hit the letter P, we could set the left and right locators around the event. So this is a kind of a question a lot of people had, wanted to do. I think this came in 9.5. But if we go to the project menu and we'll see signature track, and here we can say render MIDI click between locators or render audio click between the locators. So now if I just render the audio click, it'll create a new audio track for us, and it'll be the lovely Cubase click track will be just rendered as an audio file, so you could route that to many different sources. So yeah, it's a great trick. See Gareth saying Greg needs bass, must comply. So it'll inspire you to finish your ballad. So all right, so I guess with that, we'll wait to see if there's another question. We'll wrap up. If not, I feel like I did well if I get the gold trophy from Agent K. So I've won for the live stream. So okay, so with that, we will go ahead and wrap up. Thanks to everyone. Have a wonderful weekend, and we look forward to seeing everyone back on Tuesday, starting at 1 p.m. U.S. Eastern. Again, if you have questions you want to see, you can submit them in advance to clubcubase@steinberg.de. Please stay safe and healthy. Goodbye.